The thunder crashed so loud it seemed to shake the windows of the old ranch house. Rain slammed down in silver sheets, turning the Montana night into a blur of sound and shadows. Inside, Ethan Moore's heart pounded faster than the storm outside. He pressed his face against the cool glass, searching the darkness for any sign of Bandit, their little beagle who'd bolted during the first rumble of thunder. Ava, his little sister, stood behind him clutching a flashlight and Bandit's chewed-up tennis ball. "Do you think he's scared?" "The river, Ethan." "What if he'll come back," Ethan said, but his voice sounded thin, even to himself. He knew the river by heart, the way it could swell and rage after storms like this. Still, their dad's warning echoed. "Don't go out in a storm. Don't you dare." But Bandit was out there alone, and the storm was only getting worse. Suddenly, a faint yelp cut through the noise. Ethan spun. "Did you hear that?" Ava's eyes went wide as she nodded. Without another word, Ethan pulled on his mud-caked boots, grabbed a slicker for Ava, and cracked open the back door. The wind tried to slam it shut again, but he held tight, motioning Ava to follow. The cold rain slapped their faces as they sprinted into the night, boots splashing in puddles, every muscle tensed with fear and hope. They zigzagged across the pasture, calling for Bandit, their voices lost in the roar of wind and water. Lightning split the sky, briefly turning night to day. Ethan saw the river's edge, swollen and angry, a ribbon of white foam and black current. Ova tugged his sleeve, pointing. There, near the old cottonwoods, a patch of fur gleamed in the flickering light. But when they got closer, it wasn't Bandit. Instead, a huge wild horse, a Mustang, black as midnight, muscles bunching and trembling with every flash of lightning, stood trapped in a heavy wire snare. The animal thrashed, eyes wide with panic, froth flecking its muzzle, hooves churning mud as the water crept higher around its legs. Ava gasped, stepping back. "That's Thunder! The wild horse from the ridge!" Ethan swallowed hard. He'd seen Thunder from afar, always on the horizon, wild and proud, never this close. Now the Mustang was desperate, fighting for its life, the snare digging deep into its flank. The river surged only feet away. If the water rose much more, he turned to Ava, voice barely a whisper over the storm. "We have to help him, now, before he drowns." Ava's hand found his, small but steady. She looked scared, but she didn't back away. The two of them edged closer. Thunder reared, whinnying, nearly striking Ethan with a powerful hoof. He froze, heart hammering, then moved again, slow and low, like their mom had taught them when she was alive. "Make yourself small. Talk calm. Show you're a friend. Easy, boy. We're not going to hurt you, I promise," Ethan murmured. Ava crouched beside him, shining her light on the tangled wire. The snare had twisted around Thunder's leg and pulled tight against a fallen branch. It must have been set by poachers. No real rancher would use wire like this. Ethan yanked off his slicker and threw it over the Mustang's head, shielding his eyes. Thunder jolted, but didn't kick. Ethan's hands shook as he reached for the wire. Each time Thunder jerked, the rain-slick metal bit his fingers, but he gritted his teeth, kept working inch by inch, ignoring the pain and the way the water was starting to lap at his boots. "Come on, please," Ava whispered, her flashlight trembling. Finally, with a final twist, the wire slipped loose. Thunder staggered, nostrils flaring, coat streaked with rain and mud. But he was free. For a heartbeat, he stood stock still, staring at Ethan through the storm. Their eyes locked. Ethan felt a strange jolt, like the wildness in Thunder was looking right through him. Then, as if the storm had called him, Thunder bolted, splashing away into the darkness, mane whipping behind him. He vanished up the ridge, only a streak of black and a wild echo of hooves. Ethan sagged, breath coming in sharp gulps, hands bleeding and raw. Ava wrapped her arms around him. "You did it! You saved him!" But the river was still rising. Ethan glanced down, searching for Bandit. For a moment, dread gripped him, but then, out from a tangle of brush, a small, muddy shape tumbled toward them, barking in wild relief. Bandit jumped into Ava's arms, tail wagging furiously, shaking water everywhere. "Let's get home, before Dad finds out." Ethan grinned, wiping mud from his face, a shaky laugh bubbling up between sobs of relief. They raced back across the pasture, rain drumming on their backs, the storm starting to roll away behind them. As they reached the porch, Ethan glanced back one last time. Far up on the ridge, silhouetted against a flicker of lightning, Thunder stood, watching. Even from a distance, Ethan could feel his gratitude, wild and proud and fierce as the night. Inside, they tumbled through the door, soaked to the bone, hearts pounding. Their dad stomped in from the kitchen, eyebrows raised. "Where the heck have you—" But Ethan just grinned, clutching Bandit, Ava by his side, thunder rolling away into the hills. He knew tonight had changed something. Out there in the wild heart of the storm, a secret bond had been made. And deep down, Ethan sensed this was only the beginning. The morning after the storm broke with a gray, shivering light. Ethan's hands still ached from the wire, and his boots, left by the door, were caked with dried mud. In the kitchen, their dad moved stiffly, sipping black coffee, eyes flicking to Ethan and Ava with a look that said he knew something, maybe everything, about their night adventure. But he wasn't ready to talk about it yet. Ethan wanted to tell him about Thunder, the wild Mustang, about how they'd saved him, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he just poured cereal, watching Ava doodle in her sketchbook. Bandit sprawled at her feet like nothing had ever happened. The phone rang, once, then again, a shrill insistence that cut through the uneasy calm. Dad answered, frowning. After a few curt words, he hung up, his jaw tight. "They saw something last night," he muttered. "A wild horse, maybe near the river. News travels fast out here." Ethan glanced at Ava. Their secret didn't feel so secret anymore. By noon, the whole town was buzzing about the Black Phantom Mustang. Over at the feed store, old-timers swapped stories. At school, kids traded wild rumors. Some claimed Thunder could outrun a train. Others whispered he was cursed, the ghost of an outlaw's horse come back for revenge. Ethan heard the talk but kept quiet, carrying the memory of Thunder's terrified eyes. That afternoon, a shiny black pickup rolled up the drive. Clay McMillan stepped out, boots gleaming, hat pulled low, sunglasses hiding his eyes even though the sky was still overcast. Clay was the biggest landowner in the county, owner of the sprawling McMillan Ranch, and everyone knew he hated wild horses. Their dad went out to meet him, shoulders set and hard. Ethan and Ava crept to the window, listening. "Morning, Bill," Clay drawled, his voice oily smooth. "Heard there was a Mustang running loose. Dangerous animals, you know. Damaging fences, spooking cattle. Someone could get hurt. You ought to think about selling, Bill. This old place isn't worth the trouble anymore." Their dad's voice was quiet, but sharp as barbed wire. "We take care of our own, Clay. Always have." Clay smiled, slow and cold. "Just a friendly warning. If something happens, I'll have to call in the county. Or lawyers. You know how these things go." Ethan clenched his fists. He wanted to shout at Clay, to tell him Thunder was no monster. But his dad's look stopped him, as Clay's truck rolled away, spraying gravel. Ethan felt the weight of something bigger than himself settling on his shoulders. That night, after supper, Ethan tossed in bed, unable to sleep. The storm had left the world damp and unsettled. Moonlight crept through the window, throwing shifting patterns across the floor. A noise outside, a twig snapping. Ethan bolted upright, heart racing. He slipped from his room, tiptoeing past his dad's door, Ava's room, Bandit following silently at his heels. Out in the yard, shadows moved between the barn and the fence line. Ethan crouched behind a stack of hay bales, peering into the darkness. Two men, Clay's men. He recognized their bulky shapes, the way they moved like they owned the place, were stringing something along the lower field. Ethan's breath caught. Wire snares, just like the one that nearly killed Thunder. The men laughed, low and mean. One muttered, "Boss wants these horses gone by morning. Macmillan land, more land, it's all the same soon enough." Ethan's stomach twisted. He wanted to run back inside, wake his dad, call someone, anyone, but fear pinned him in place. Suddenly, a hand tugged at his shirt. Ava! She'd followed him, silent as a ghost, eyes wide. Ethan motioned for her to keep low. Together they watched the men finish setting the snares and disappear into the dark, boots squelching through the wet grass. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't let Thunder or any of the Mustangs fall into another trap. But what could two kids do against grown men, money, and the law? They crawled back to the house, slipping in through the mudroom. Ava's lips trembled. What if Clay hurts them? What if he... "We can't let him win," Ethan said, voice tight. "We have to do something." In the morning, the news had already spread. Another horse caught, this one a sorrel mare, found dead by the river. The town's gossip grew sharper, people muttering about wild animals and lost calves, the dangers to property and children. Ethan saw it in their faces at school. The fear, the suspicion. Kids he'd known all his life now eyed him like he was crazy for caring about the Mustangs. Even Mr. Harris, their teacher, warned, "Wild horses are unpredictable, Ethan. You can't trust them." Ethan bristled, but kept silent. Only Ava understood. Only she saw the hurt in his eyes. That afternoon, Dad came home early, his face lined with worry. "Clay's putting pressure on everyone," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Talking lawsuits, talking about the ranch. Wants us to sign over grazing rights or else." Ava clung to his arm. "Are we going to lose the ranch?" He knelt down, pulling them close. "Not if I can help it, but we have to be smart and careful." That night, Ethan stared at the ceiling, listening to the creaks and sighs of the old house. Trust in grown-ups, in rules, in the safety of home. It all seemed so fragile now. He remembered Thunder's wild eyes, the way the Mustang had looked at him, almost like they shared a secret. Ethan made a promise to himself. Right then, as Thunder rolled far away in the hills, he wouldn't let Clay win. He wouldn't let the wild spirit of the land be crushed under fear and greed. He didn't know how they'd fight back, but he knew, somehow, they would. And somewhere in the dark, Thunder waited, alive, free, and trusting him to do what was right. The storm passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and glistening in the pale morning light. Dew clung to every blade of grass. Spiderwebs sparkled like tiny galaxies, and the scent of rain lingered over the Montana hills. For Ethan, the wildness of the previous night lingered too. He woke before dawn, unable to rest, and watched from the window as the world outside softened from slate blue to golden. Ava was already awake, bundled in her quilt, drawing quietly at her desk. She'd barely spoken since the night before, her face pinched with worry. Ethan padded over, glancing at her sketchbook. On the page was a rough but hopeful drawing of Thunder. Wild mane, bright eyes, muscles tense with power and fear. He squeezed her shoulder. "We'll see him again. You'll get to finish that." Ava nodded, then chewed her lip. "But how? If we go out, Dad will find out. And Clay's men." "We'll be careful," Ethan said. "We just have to let him know we're not like them." After a rushed breakfast and a half-hearted promise to stay near the house, Ethan and Ava gathered apples from the pantry, tucking them into their jackets. Bandit whined at the door, tail thumping, eager for another adventure. The sun crested the ridge as they slipped out, taking the back path that wound along the cottonwoods and led into the wild edges of their land. The world was alive with birdsong and dripping leaves, but every sound seemed sharper now. Every snap of a twig or whisper of wind sent Ethan's heart racing. He remembered the traps set by Clay's men, and his hands curled tighter around the apples. They stopped at a clearing, a place they'd seen Thunder before. Ethan set a few apples on a flat rock near the brush, then stepped back, motioning for Ava to keep low. Time seemed to stretch. The forest was still, except for Bandit's occasional sniff and the nervous flutter in Ethan's chest. Minutes passed. A jay scolded from a high branch. Ava sketched, eyes darting between her page and the trees. Then, with a sound like wind in grass, Thunder appeared at the edge of the woods. The black Mustang stood half-hidden, nostrils flaring, eyes wary. He looked every bit as wild and untouchable as Ethan remembered. Yet something in his gaze was softer now, less panicked, more curious. Ethan held his breath as Thunder inched closer, every movement careful and tense. The horse eyed the apples, then flicked his ears at the kids. For a long, silent moment, no one moved. Finally, Thunder stepped forward, lowering his head to nudge an apple. He chewed, eyes never leaving Ethan. Ava scribbled furiously, her pencil scratching the page, capturing the lines of Thunder's neck, the scars on his leg from the snare. "He's not afraid," she whispered. "He remembers us." Ethan smiled, relief and wonder swirling inside him. "He trusts us, at least a little." They came back every morning, always careful, always quiet. Sometimes Thunder came alone. Other times, a few more Mustangs appeared. Gray, bay, chestnut, each wild and beautiful in their own way. They watched from a distance as the horses grazed, nuzzled the apples, then vanished back into the pines. One morning, Ava brought her colored pencils, adding copper and jet and storm gray to her sketches. She started a journal, too, noting every horse, every scar, every moment Thunder looked her way. "If people could see them like this," she said, "they wouldn't be so scared." But the world beyond their secret glade felt less safe each day. Rumors swirled about more traps, missing cattle, the threat of lawsuits. At home, their dad grew quieter, worry etched deep on his face. One night, as Ethan helped him oil the old rifle, Dad's voice cut through the hush. "Some things can't be changed, son," he said, staring out the window at the moonlit pasture. "Some fights just wear you down, no matter how hard you try. Folks in this town, once they make up their mind, it's tough to turn them." Ethan looked up, defiant. "But it's not right. The Mustangs, they belong here too, just because Clay says they're dangerous." Dad sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I know what you're feeling, Ethan. I do. Your mom, she believed in fighting for what's right. But not every battle gets won." Ethan wanted to argue, to yell, but the words tangled in his chest. He thought of Thunder, how the horse had trusted him, how he'd risked his own safety to set him free. Wasn't that proof things could change, even when it seemed impossible? Later, as the house quieted, Ethan slipped outside and sat under the porch eaves, Bandit pressed warm against his side. He gazed at the stars, the endless Montana sky wide and cold above him. His mind spun with doubts, with the ache of wanting to help but not knowing how. In the darkness, Ava joined him, sketchbook in hand. She held out her newest drawing, a portrait of Thunder, surrounded by the whole wild herd. At the bottom, she'd written, "Wild and free, worth fighting for." Ethan took the picture, tracing the lines with his finger. For the first time in days, hope flickered inside him. Not bright, but steady. Maybe it wouldn't be easy. Maybe grown-ups didn't believe kids could make a difference. But he and Ava had seen Thunder's trust with their own eyes. That meant something. The next morning, as the sun split the mist, Ethan and Ava returned to the clearing. This time, Thunder came closer than ever. He sniffed Ethan's sleeve, his breath warm and damp, then nudged Ava's hand, almost playful. Ava giggled, her fear melting away. "He knows us! He really does!" Ethan grinned, the weight of the past days lifting. For a few shining minutes, everything felt possible, like the wild and the tame. The old wounds and new hopes could finally come together. He didn't know what Clay or the town would do next. He didn't know if their dad's worries would come true. But for now, Ethan knew one thing. Trust was a bridge, and he and Thunder were building it. Slowly, morning by morning, hope by fragile hope. The following Saturday, as Ethan and Ava finished feeding the chickens, the crunch of tires on gravel caught their attention. They looked up to see a silver SUV rolling to a stop in the driveway. The back door opened, and out stepped Luke, Ethan's older cousin from Chicago, wearing new sneakers, headphones slung around his neck, and a look of mild annoyance. Their dad met him with a handshake and a hug. "Welcome to Montana, Luke. Hope you're ready for a little fresh air." Luke glanced around, squinting at the open fields and distant pine hills like he'd just landed on Mars. Ethan swallowed, nerves tightening in his stomach. He and Luke hadn't spent much time together, and what little he remembered was mostly awkward silences and half-hearted "how you doings" at family reunions. Ava waved shyly. Luke raised his hand in a small bored greeting. Inside, Luke flopped on the couch, scrolling his phone while Ethan and Ava finished chores. Their dad explained, "Luke's staying a couple weeks while his mom's out of town. I want you to show him around, help him feel at home." As soon as their dad stepped outside, Ethan muttered, "He hates it here. He's a city kid. He's gonna think we're weird." Ava giggled, but Ethan's worry lingered. He glanced at Luke, who was already texting someone back home, headphones clamped tight. Later that afternoon, as the three kids headed to the barn, Ethan finally broke the silence. "You ever seen a wild horse, Luke?" Luke shrugged. "I've seen police horses. Maybe a parade one once. I guess they're cool." Ava pulled out her sketchbook, showing off her drawings of Thunder and the Mustang herd. Luke's eyes widened slightly. "Wait, you drew that? You guys really see wild horses around here?" Ethan felt a surge of pride. "We do. We even helped rescue one. His name's Thunder." Luke arched a skeptical eyebrow. "Let me guess. You ride him across canyons and save the day?" Ethan bristled, but Ava stepped in. "We don't ride him. He's wild. But he remembers us. We leave apples. He comes close." Luke gave a half smile, but Ethan caught the doubt behind it. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold and lavender, their dad called Ethan to the porch. "I know you want to protect those horses, son, but there's a lot you don't know about Clay, or this town. I need you to be careful." Ethan's voice was small. "You don't think we can make a difference, do you?" Their dad was silent for a long time. Finally, he sighed. "When your mom died, I lost a lot of faith in people, in the town. She was the fighter. She believed we could change things. Sometimes, I'm not so sure anymore." Ethan stared at the boards beneath his feet. "I just miss her. I wish she was here." His dad put a rough hand on his shoulder. "Me too, son. But you got her fire. Don't lose it, okay?" As the night cooled, Ethan found himself telling Luke about their mom for the first time. How she'd loved animals, how she'd spent weekends teaching them to listen to the wild. Luke listened. Really listened. And something softened in his face. "Sounds like she was awesome," Luke said quietly. "My dad, he's not around much. Guess we're all missing someone." Ethan nodded, feeling the knot in his chest loosen just a bit. For the first time, the silence between them didn't feel awkward. The next day, Ethan, Ava, and Luke huddled in the living room, poring over library books, Ava's journals, and anything they could find online about wild mustangs. Luke, surprisingly, dove into research with them, his skepticism replaced by curiosity. "Did you know," Luke read, scrolling through an article, "that mustangs are technically feral horses? Some people want them all gone. Others think they're living history." Ava piped up. "They're not hurting anybody. If we could prove it, maybe the town would listen." Ethan nodded, excitement building. "Let's document everything. If we track Thunder's herd, show they don't mess up fences or hurt cattle, maybe people will believe us." They started a log. Notes, sketches, photos snapped with Luke's phone from a distance. Every morning, they'd creep out to the clearing, recording what the horses ate, where they roamed, how gentle they were when left alone. Luke even borrowed a pair of binoculars from their dad, and soon he was the one spotting new horses and snapping blurry but hopeful shots. In the evenings, Ethan noticed a subtle change in Luke. He didn't reach for his phone as much. Instead, he'd watch the horses with genuine fascination, marvel at their speed, and laugh as Bandit tried to keep up, only to fall into the dust, tongue lolling. One rainy afternoon, as they logged their findings, Ava glanced at the window. "Do you think anyone will care, even with proof?" Ethan hesitated, but Luke answered first. "I don't know, but people in Chicago care about weird stuff all the time. Animals, parks. Maybe the trick is getting the right people to listen." Ethan grinned. "Maybe you're not so much of a city kid after all." While the kids built their case, Clay McMillan's shadow stretched longer. At the edge of town, he sat at his desk, staring at old photos. Him as a boy beside a chestnut colt, both smiling and bright. The image faded into present-day Clay, jaw set, eyes hard as he read news of the Mustangs. His phone buzzed with messages about fences, lawsuits, angry neighbors, but for a fleeting second, regret flickered in his eyes. He shoved the photo in a drawer, face hardening. "No more mistakes," he muttered. "Those horses are trouble, always have been." As dusk settled on the ranch, Ethan, Ava, and Luke sat side by side, their journals and sketches spread before them. For the first time, Ethan felt like he wasn't alone in the fight. Together, they were more than just kids. They were a team. And with Luke on their side, maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. From the ridge, Thunder watched, wild and watchful, as the wind carried a promise. Old wounds could heal, and new friendships might just change everything. Word of the Mustangs, and of Thunder in particular, grew louder in the weeks after Luke's arrival. Whispers turned to open debate at the diner, the school, and even the church. Some folks said the horses were a blessing, living reminders of the West's wild spirit. Others echoed Clay McMillan, calling them a menace, a threat to fences, cattle, and livelihoods. Ethan noticed that his father's friends stopped coming by as often, and at the grocery store, Mrs. Crenshaw, who always slipped him an extra cookie, barely met his eyes. It was a gray, tense morning when the town's bulletin board filled up with bold red flyers, town meeting emergency wild horses to be rounded up. In 1 week, the notice said, every wild horse on private land would be captured and auctioned. Ranchers were to report any sightings, and anyone found interfering would face legal consequences. At the bottom was Clay McMillan's signature, neat and cold. Ethan stared at the paper, a sick feeling twisting inside. Ava read it aloud, her voice cracking. They're going to catch them all, even Thunder. Luke crumpled his flyer in his fist. This is wrong! We can't let them do this! They hurried home, storm clouds gathering in more ways than one. Their dad sat at the kitchen table, letter in hand, jaw clenched. Clay called this morning, he said. He's not bluffing. If we don't cooperate, he's threatening to sue us for damages. Might even try to take the ranch. Ethan's heart dropped. What are we going to do? Their dad shook his head. I won't let them take this place if I can help it. But I can't fight the whole county alone. For the first time, Ethan saw how tired his father looked. There were lines on his face Ethan hadn't noticed before. Worry lines, and a dullness in his eyes. He reached out, squeezing his dad's hand. We're not alone. We'll fight too, all of us. Ava nodded fiercely. We have proof, our journals, the pictures, everything. We can show the town Thunder and the herd aren't dangerous. Luke's voice was tight, but determined. And we're not giving up, not now. That afternoon, the 3 kids went into action. They went door to door, telling neighbors what they'd seen, how the Mustangs kept to themselves, how Clay's traps were the real danger. They made bright posters, Save our Mustangs, and wild doesn't mean dangerous. They started a petition, asking folks to sign and demand the town call off the roundup. Some people listened, especially old Mrs. Green, who remembered riding wild ponies as a girl, and a few of their classmates from school. Others shut their doors, grumbling about property values and insurance. Clay's voice seemed to echo everywhere. This isn't your fight. Stay out of grown-up business. But for every cold shoulder, there was a small victory, a signature, a handshake, a whispered, I hope you win, kiddo. One night, Ethan and Luke snuck out to post flyers at the feed store, Ava keeping watch from her bike. As they stapled the last one, a truck's headlights flashed. They dove behind a dumpster, hearts pounding. Clay's men got out, muttering about kids and their bleeding hearts as they tore down the posters, crumpling them underfoot. Ethan held his breath, watching anger turn to fear. If they were caught now, but the men left, laughing into the darkness, and Ethan's resolve hardened. A few days later, as the deadline drew closer, Ethan noticed Thunder limping near the far fence line. He motioned to Ava and Luke, and together they crept through the tall grass, hearts in their throats. As they got closer, they saw blood streaking Thunder's flank. Another cruel snare wound tight around his leg. "Oh no, not again," Ava whispered, tears welling. "Help me, hold him," Ethan said, his hands shaking. Luke grabbed Thunder's halter, while Ava stroked the horse's neck, whispering soothing words. Thunder's breath came hard, but he didn't bolt. Carefully, Ethan used his pocket knife to cut the wire. Thunder staggered, foam at his lips, blood in the mud. "We can't leave him here," Luke said. "Clay's men will find him. There's the old barn," Ava said suddenly, eyes wide. "The one nobody uses. It's dry and nobody goes out there anymore." The decision was made in a heartbeat. The kids coaxed Thunder across the field, guiding him by flashlight through a narrow path until they reached the abandoned barn at the edge of the property. Inside, it smelled of dust and old hay, the beams sagging but still strong. They found an old horse blanket and some bandages in a trunk left by their mom. Ava kept watch at the door while Ethan cleaned the wound, Luke holding Thunder's head as the big Mustang shivered in pain. "Easy, boy. Almost done," Ethan murmured, tears stinging his eyes as he saw the blood and the way Thunder trusted them, even when it hurt. When they finally finished, Thunder lay down, exhausted but safe, breathing deep. The kids took turns sitting with him, Ava sketching by lantern light, Luke jotting notes for their journal. They made it back home just before dawn, mud-streaked and exhausted. Their dad was waiting, arms folded. Ethan's heart froze, but instead of yelling, their dad knelt beside him, looking into his eyes. "You hit him, didn't you? You tried to save that horse." Ethan nodded, expecting the worst. Their dad just sighed, pulling him into a hug. "You did what you had to do. I was wrong to think this wasn't our fight. We stand together, no matter what." Relief and pride flooded Ethan. "We're not giving up," his dad nodded. "Then neither am I. We'll keep Thunder safe, whatever it takes." As the sun rose, lighting the barn in gold and hope, Ethan knew the battle was only beginning. But for the first time, he felt like they could win. Not just for Thunder, but for every wild thing fighting for a place in the world. The week crawled by, every day heavier than the last. The town meeting came and went, but the lines were drawn now. Ranchers nervous and angry, Clay McMillan more determined than ever. Flyers tacked to every fence post and telephone pole shouted about the coming roundup. Ethan felt the pressure like a physical weight on his chest, pressing harder every time he saw Thunder's trusting eyes in the old barn. They took turns tending Thunder, changing his bandages, keeping the wound clean. Luke checked the perimeter for Clay's men every afternoon. Ava made sure Thunder never felt alone, sketching for hours, whispering stories, her hope the only steady thing in the old barn. Their dad, now fully in their corner, watched the horizon each evening, shotgun at his side. Not out of violence, but to send a message. Stay away. But everyone knew it was just a matter of time. One night, as the sky turned dark blue and the wind whipped cold through the eaves, Luke burst through the kitchen door, panting. "They're starting. The roundup's early. I saw Clay's trucks and men coming up the road. Maybe a dozen of them. They've got spotlights and dogs." Ethan's pulse spiked. "We have to move Thunder, now. If they find him here, it's over. They'll take him, and every wild horse they can catch." Their dad's jaw clenched. "There's one chance. Old logging bridge, out past the West Woods. It hasn't been used in years. It's not on any maps anymore, not even most folks' GPS. If you can get Thunder and the herd across, there's enough wild land beyond for them to disappear until this blows over. But you've got to go tonight." Ava's eyes grew wide. "But Dad, the bridge. You said it was falling apart." Their dad squeezed her hand. "You'll have to be careful. If you wait, there won't be any wild horses left to save." They packed quickly, adrenaline making their hands clumsy. Ava tossed apples and carrots into a feed bag. Luke loaded the old camera, journal, and a flashlight. Their dad grabbed the first aid kit, handed it to Ethan. "You know horses better than anyone here. If Thunder trusts you, the others will follow." They made their way through the back fields. Shadows pressed tight around them. The moon broke through now and then, making the world silvery and strange. In the barn, Thunder stood, head high, wounds bandaged but eyes bright. When Ethan pressed his forehead to Thunder's, he could feel the Mustang's heart racing, the same mix of fear and wild hope burning in his own chest. They opened the corral gates in the lower pasture, freeing the small herd that had been grazing nearby. The horses hesitated, sensing the tension in the air, but Thunder tossed his head, snorted, and trotted forward. The herd followed, Ava whispering encouragement, Luke jogging at their heels. Behind them, trucks rumbled closer. The beams of flashlights swung through the dark, dogs barking, men shouting orders. "Over there! I see tracks! Move!" Ethan urged, heart pounding. Thunder broke into a gallop, the herd surging after him, hooves pounding mud and grass. Ava and Luke ran to the side, waving arms, calling softly to keep the horses together. Their dad jogged behind, glancing back to make sure no one was falling behind. They reached the edge of the woods, the bridge looming ahead, an old span of timber and rusted metal, sagging over a fast, churning creek swollen by spring rains. The boards groaned under the weight of memory and time. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. If the bridge failed... A shout rang out behind them. Clay's men, just at the tree line. "There they are! Don't let them get away!" Ethan looked at Thunder. "It's now or never. You can do this, boy." Thunder pawed the ground, nostrils flaring, then took the first step onto the bridge. The boards creaked, but held. Ethan followed, breath held tight, leading Thunder by the halter. The herd pressed close behind. One by one, the Mustangs stepped onto the bridge, hooves clattering. Ava and Luke dashed to the side, yelling and waving, drawing the attention of Clay's men. "Hey, over here! You want us? Come get us!" The bridge shuddered. Planks shifted under Ethan's boots. He could hear the water raging below. The last Mustang, a pale mare with a crooked blaze, balked halfway across, refusing to budge. Behind her, the men closed in, flashlights flickering, voices rising. "Hurry up! Don't let them cross!" Ethan raced back, heart hammering. "Come on, girl, you're almost there!" He clapped his hands, waving the apple Ava had given him. The mare tossed her head, snorted, then took a trembling step forward. Thunder turned back, nickered, a call for the herd to trust, to follow. As the final horse set hoof on the far side, the bridge gave a thunderous crack. Ethan sprinted, leaping the last 2 feet as a section of railing split away and plunged into the churning water below. For a split second, he dangled, legs kicking. Then Luke grabbed his jacket, hauling him to safety. Behind them, Clay's men shouted, but the bridge sagged dangerously, making pursuit impossible. Breathless, soaked with sweat and fear, the kids and their dad led the herd deep into the woods. Finally, when the last horse vanished into the shadows, Ethan slumped to his knees, laughter and tears mixing as Ava hugged him tight. Thunder circled back, bumping Ethan's shoulder with his nose, wild eyes shining with gratitude. Luke, panting, grinned. "You did it, Ethan! You saved them!" Somewhere nearby, a camera flashed. The local reporter, drawn by the noise and commotion, had witnessed the whole escape. She snapped photos, took frantic notes, her eyes wide with wonder. Within hours, the story would be all over the internet. Kids risking everything to save the wild Mustangs. A daring escape across a collapsing bridge. As dawn broke, the world seemed to pause. Breath held in the hush after the storm. Thunder and his herd disappeared into the wild beyond. Safe. For now. The family, bruised and exhausted, stood on the edge of the woods, watching the light return. Ethan glanced at Ava and Luke, his father at his side. Against all odds, they had given Thunder and the wild herd another chance. For the first time since the stormy night when everything changed, hope felt real. And somewhere in the trees, a black Mustang paused, looked back, and then vanished into freedom, the legend growing even larger with every heartbeat. By the next morning, the whole town was buzzing. Social media exploded with photos of the wild escape. The Mustangs galloping across the bridge, the broken boards, the three kids guiding Thunder with everything they had. The local news reporter's post had gone viral, drawing in animal lovers, ranchers, and journalists from all over Montana. In less than 24 hours, what started as a local drama had grown into a statewide story. At breakfast, Ethan's phone dinged with new messages every few minutes. Some cheered him on, calling him a hero. Others accused the family of stirring up trouble and putting the town's future at risk. Their dad's voice was steady as he poured coffee. "It's out there now. Clay won't be able to sweep this under the rug." But no one had any illusions. The fight was far from over. Ava spent the morning editing video clips on her laptop, piecing together footage from her phone and the news story. She added Ava's hand-drawn images of the Mustangs, Thunder, the pale mare, the foals running wild and free, layering them with gentle piano music. When she finished, she posted the video online with a simple caption, "Let them run free." Within hours, hundreds of people had shared the post, including teachers, local shopkeepers, and a famous rodeo rider who'd grown up in town. Even Mrs. Crenshaw from the grocery store, who had barely looked at Ethan the week before, left a comment, "Beautiful. Don't let them take the wild out of Montana." But as momentum built, so did the pressure. The auction yard was packed that afternoon. Clay McMillan stood at the center, crisp in a blue jacket, clipboard in hand. Cattlemen and buyers from out of state crowded the pen where a few captured Mustangs were already being held, their eyes rolling in terror. Clay's men stood on alert, arms folded, watching every move. Ethan, Ava, Luke, and a handful of classmates arrived at the yard, posters in hand, voices trembling but loud. Ethan's dad and a few neighbors were there too, forming a loose line between the horses and the auction crowd. Ava's hands shook as she hit Go Live on her phone. "We're here at the auction yard. Clay McMillan wants to sell these wild horses for profit. If you care about Montana's wild places, help us stop this." The camera caught it all. The Mustangs pacing, Clay frowning, townsfolk murmuring as the live stream grew. People started arriving, drawn by the posts and the news story. Mrs. Green from church showed up with a sign, "Save the wild ones." Even Mr. Harris, their teacher, stood near the fence, arms crossed, a look of pride in his eyes. Clay approached, voice cold but careful. "This is private property. The auction's legal. The horses are dangerous. Step aside." Ethan squared his shoulders. Ava beside him, Luke on his other side. "They're not dangerous. We have proof. They just want to live free. You set those traps. Thunder almost died because of you." The crowd murmured, watching. Someone in the back called out, "Let the kids speak." Another, "Aren't wild horses part of our heritage?" Ava's video continued streaming. "We can't let greed decide what happens to these animals. Montana belongs to everyone, not just the rich." Clay's face darkened. "You kids are meddling where you don't belong." Suddenly, a woman from the local animal rescue stepped forward. "I'll take 3 of the horses, at no cost to the county. I'll sign adoption papers right now." Others joined in. "We'll help. Don't send them to slaughter." The auctioneer hesitated. The tension was electric, the line between old ways and new drawn in the dirt. Ava kept filming as more townsfolk voiced support. One rancher said, "My cattle are fine. It's the developers we ought to worry about." The crowd's energy changed. Less fear, more defiance. Ethan's heart hammered. He glanced at Clay, whose mask slipped for a moment. Was that doubt? Or just anger? Suddenly, Thunder rumbled on the horizon. Storm clouds gathered, wind whipping dust across the yard. It felt like the sky itself was waiting to see who would blink first. Clay lifted the microphone, voice shaking only a little. "These horses have caused enough trouble. If you don't clear out, the sheriff will be called." But now it was Ava's voice, clear and determined, that rang out over the yard and across hundreds of phones. "We're not leaving. Not until you promise to stop the roundup." She turned the camera on the crowd. "If you care, share this. Call the governor, write the news. Help us save what's left of wild Montana." The tension snapped as more people began chanting, "Let them run! Let them run!" The sheriff, finally arriving, paused, taking in the scene. A sea of townspeople, kids at the front, the horses trembling in their pen. He turned to Clay. "You have a mess here, McMillan. You sure you want to push this?" Clay glared, jaw working, pride and anger warring in his eyes. I just want what's best for everyone." "Then listen to them," the sheriff said softly. For a long moment, no one moved. The Mustangs stood together, pressed to the back of the pen, eyes wide. Ethan thought of all the mornings in the woods, Thunder's trust, the risk they'd taken. He wondered if it would ever be enough. Then, as the rain began to fall, Ava lifted her camera once more, her voice trembling with hope and fury. "This isn't just about horses. It's about all of us. What kind of people we want to be. Don't let fear win." People cheered. Even the old ranchers raised their hats. For a moment, Ethan saw Clay hesitate, torn between stubbornness and the weight of so many eyes. The battle wasn't won yet, but for the first time the truth was out, and the whole world was watching. The auction yard had barely settled when the first heavy drops of rain began to fall. The crowd, restless and agitated, pressed in closer to the pens as thunder rolled in the distance. Clay McMillan stood by the gate, his face hard as stone, clipboard clutched tight, watching as townspeople, some angry, some awed, huddled together. The sheriff paced nearby, uneasy, as if the storm in the sky might leap down and strike at any second. Ethan stood with Ava and Luke at the front line, mud splashing up their boots, their posters drooping from the rain. The air felt charged, like the world was waiting to see which side would give first, the wild or the tame. Ava's live stream was still going, the little red light glowing on her phone as people watched from homes, cars, and offices across the state. The tension was so thick it was hard to breathe. Ethan reached for Ava's hand, squeezing it as lightning forked overhead. Suddenly, the storm crashed into town. Wind whipped through the auction yard, slamming a loose metal gate against the barn wall with a bang. The horses reared, eyes rolling, hooves clattering in panic. Clay's men shouted, scrambling to keep the Mustangs contained. The sheriff yelled, trying to direct the crowd to safety as rain lashed down harder. Ethan saw the fear in Thunder's eyes, the same terror he'd seen the night they'd first met, when the river was rising and the wild Mustang was caught in that awful snare. But this time Thunder wasn't trapped. He kicked hard at the latch, and with a sudden clang, the gate swung wide. The other Mustangs surged forward, flooding out of the pen into the muddy yard, slipping and scrambling in confusion. For a wild moment, everything turned to chaos. People shouted, some diving for cover, others trying to help. The horses scattered, some racing for the fence, others circling back toward the barn. Ethan's eyes widened. "The barn doors! If they get stuck inside!" Ava's voice was lost in the wind. "We have to help!" Without thinking, Ethan sprinted for the barn, Luke right behind him, Ava clutching her phone as she ran. Inside, the shadows were thick and the storm raged on the tin roof, drowning out their voices. Several Mustangs had bolted through the open door, now panicked and trapped, hooves slipping on the wet concrete floor. Suddenly, a heavy beam, already weakened by years of neglect and the wild weather, creaked ominously overhead. Ethan saw it just in time. "Watch out!" he shouted, shoving Luke and Eva out of the way as the beam gave way with a shuddering crash. He tried to scramble free, but a splintered board pinned his leg to the ground. The air filled with dust and the screaming of frightened horses. Ethan gasped, pain shooting through his leg, the barn spinning above him. He tried to crawl out, but it was useless. "Help!" he cried, voice breaking, so Luke and Eva reached for him, but couldn't move the heavy timber. "Hang on, Ethan! Don't move!" Luke yelled. In the confusion, the Mustangs bucked and swirled, more likely to trample Ethan than save him. Clay's men yelled from outside, but no one came in. Then, through the swirling dust and lightning flashes, thunder appeared. Soaked, wild-eyed, nostrils flaring, the black Mustang skidded to a halt beside Ethan. For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. Thunder lowered his head, nuzzling Ethan's shoulder. Their eyes met, the world reduced to just the two of them. Thunder tossed his mane, nostrils quivering. Then, with a powerful surge, he bit down on the edge of the heavy beam, yanking and straining, muscles rippling. He braced his legs and heaved, again, until the wood shifted, just enough for Ethan to drag himself clear. As Ethan tumbled free, another smaller beam crashed down, striking Thunder's flank. The Mustang shuddered, stumbling, but didn't run. Instead, he stood over Ethan, as if guarding him from further harm, his own body bearing the brunt of the collapse. Blood trickled down his side, mixing with rain and dust. Eva sobbed, wrapping her arms around Ethan. "You're okay. Thunder, you saved him." The crowd, seeing what had happened, rushed forward. Even Clay, stunned, stared in disbelief at the Mustang's courage. The sheriff called for help, and hands reached out to pull Ethan and Thunder from the wreckage. Thunder collapsed in the mud outside the barn, sides heaving, eyes dull with pain. Ethan pressed his forehead to Thunder's, whispering, "Hang on, boy. Don't you dare give up." Clay stood silent, jaw tight, as the townspeople gathered around. For the first time, Ethan saw something in Clay's eyes that wasn't anger, something closer to regret, maybe even awe. A vet was called, and while the rain continued to pour, people took shelter under the eaves, watching as the vet worked quickly, bandaging Thunder's wounds and giving him medicine. Eva and Luke helped, bringing towels and blankets, their faces streaked with tears and mud. All around, the townsfolk whispered about the Mustang who saved a boy, about the family who'd risked everything, about how maybe, just maybe, they'd been wrong about wild things. The sheriff, holding his hat in his hands, turned to Clay. "You saw it yourself. That horse is no menace. He saved a life tonight." Clay said nothing, but as he turned away, Ethan noticed him slipping a folded envelope into the vet's pocket. A quiet, anonymous donation for Thunder's care. The storm eased at last, the air fresh and heavy with promise. Thunder, still weak, lifted his head. Ethan knelt beside him, hope rising with every shaky breath the Mustang took. In the barn's shadow, something had changed, not just for Thunder, but for everyone. Fear had lost its grip. Kindness had won out, wild and real as the storm itself. And as Thunder closed his eyes, resting safe for the first time in days, Ethan knew the fight was no longer just theirs. The whole town was watching, and maybe, just maybe, ready to help. The rain gave way to a washed-out morning, pale gold and impossibly quiet after the chaos. Word spread quickly through town, about Thunder's heroics, about Ethan's rescue, about Clay McMillan's silence. Everyone had seen the live stream. Everyone had watched the Mustang risk his own life for a boy. And everyone knew something big had shifted, even if no one dared say it out loud. Inside the kitchen, Ethan sat at the table with his leg wrapped in ice packs, Ava at his side and Luke dozing with Bandit curled at his feet. Thunder rested in the field, flanked by neighbors who came and went, dropping off apples, oats, and blankets. The vet had stayed the night, checking every few hours, assuring Ethan, "He's tough. That Mustang's got more heart than any horse I've ever seen." Ethan watched the door, waiting for the moment he'd finally have to face Clay. In some ways, he dreaded it. In other ways, he knew it was time. Clay arrived just after lunch. He drove up in his battered pickup. No black hat, no sunglasses, just a faded plaid shirt and boots caked in mud. He hesitated at the porch, hat in his hands. For a second, Ethan almost didn't recognize him. Their dad met him at the steps, arms folded but face open. "You here for a fight or for something else, Clay?" Clay shook his head. "No more fighting. I want to talk." He stepped inside, and for a long, awkward moment, the only sound was the ticking of the kitchen clock. Finally, Clay cleared his throat, voice rough. "I saw what Thunder did. I saw what your kids did too. I was wrong, Bill, about the Mustangs, about you, about all of it." Ethan stared, surprised. Clay looked tired, older somehow, all the anger drained out. "When I was a boy, I had a horse named Blaze, wild as a storm, but he trusted me. One night, poachers set snares near our place. Blaze got caught. I never forgave myself for not saving him." He looked at Ethan, and for the first time his voice broke. "I let that grief turn to hate. I thought getting rid of the Mustangs would fix something in me, but all it did was make things worse." Ava touched Ethan's arm, tears shining in her eyes. Luke spoke up. "You can still fix things. It's not too late." Clay nodded, gaze steady now. "You're right, kid. That's why I'm here." He turned to their dad. "I own the land bordering your ranch. If you want it, I'll sign it over. Use it for the Mustangs, a sanctuary. Let them run, wild and safe, just like they were meant to." Their dad stared, stunned. "You'd really do that?" "I would. I've already talked to the county," Clay said, voice soft. "If the town agrees, we can make it official. And I'd like to help. I can build fences, put up shelters, whatever you need." Ethan couldn't help it. A shaky laugh burst out, relief and disbelief crashing together. Ava hugged Clay, surprising him, and Luke grinned. Their dad's voice trembled as he said, "Thank you, Clay. You're doing the right thing." Word spread quickly. That evening, the town packed the old Grange Hall for the meeting. Even folks who'd kept quiet before wanted to hear what came next. Clay stood at the front, shoulders straight, eyes meeting every stare. "I was wrong," he said, voice ringing out. "These horses don't threaten us. They teach us. About courage, about forgiveness. I want to help protect them. I hope you'll join me." It was quiet for a moment. Then a murmur grew, swelling into applause. People stood, one by one, voicing support. Farmers, ranchers, teachers, even the sheriff. The old divisions faded in the face of something bigger. The truth, finally spoken and finally heard. The vote was nearly unanimous. The Mustangs would stay, the sanctuary would be built, and the Moore Ranch, once on the edge of ruin, would become a hub for wild horse protection, drawing visitors, volunteers, and hope from across the state. Outside, the first stars began to appear. Ethan limped out to the pasture, where Thunder lay stretched on the grass, flanked by the rest of the Mustang herd. He knelt beside the black Mustang, running his fingers through Thunder's damp mane. "We did it," Ethan whispered. Thunder's ears flicked, eyes soft in the starlight. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. Grief for his mom, for all the fights and fears, giving way to something stronger. Pride, peace, gratitude. Ava and Luke joined him, sitting in the grass, arms around each other, watching the sky deepen from blue to velvet. Bandit chased fireflies, barking at the shadows. Their dad came out and stood with Clay by the fence, talking quietly. Both men changed by what had happened. Enemies once, but not anymore. Now, there was room for healing. By midnight, word had spread across the state. Ava's video was picked up by local news, and messages of support poured in from everywhere. Students, families, even politicians. Schools wanted to bring field trips to meet the Mustangs. Reporters wanted to write about Thunder, and a nearby university offered grants to help fund the sanctuary. As the town quieted, Ethan wrote in his journal, his words slow but certain. Sometimes, it's the hardest people who change the most. Sometimes, a wild horse can heal a whole town. And sometimes, all it takes is a little courage to do the right thing, no matter how late it comes. He closed the book, looking out over the moonlit fields, Thunder and the herd grazing quietly, finally safe. For the first time in a long time, Ethan knew this was home, and it would be for a long, long time. Change had come, born out of pain and forgiveness, and in the hush of the Montana night. The legacy of wildness and hope stretched on, as endless as the open sky. The summer sun returned, flooding the land in gold and green. In the weeks after the town's vote, the energy around the Moore Ranch changed completely. Where suspicion and anger once hung heavy, now there was the sound of laughter, hammers, and horses' hooves. Trucks pulled in daily, neighbors, volunteers, even strangers who had seen Ava's video and driven hours just to help. The sanctuary fence rose board by board, wide and strong, wrapping the pastures and woods in a promise that no one would ever snare or chase these wild horses again. Ethan woke early every morning, not out of worry now, but from anticipation. What new thing would the day bring? Sometimes it was a group of school children tumbling from a bus, squealing as Thunder and the herd came into view. Sometimes it was local ranchers bringing fresh hay, or a wildlife biologist coming to tag and track the Mustangs, explaining to Ethan and Ava the science behind their habits. Ava, never shy now, showed off her sketches and journal, her pages already filling with drawings of foals born free under the Montana sky. One afternoon, Ethan found Clay standing by the old oak fence watching Thunder graze. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air hummed with birdsong and the distant rumble of tractors. Finally, Clay reached into his jacket and pulled out an old photo, its edges curled and soft. Himself as a boy with his horse Blaze, both bright-eyed and smiling. Clay held it out, voice unsteady. "Thank you, Ethan, for giving me a chance to remember the good, not just the pain. I never thought I'd see a wild herd run here again." Ethan took the photo, studying the boy Clay used to be. "You helped make it happen. We all did. Thunder did too." Clay's mouth tugged into a rare, gentle smile. Without another word, he held out his hand. Ethan shook it. And as their hands met, it felt like the last shadows had finally faded. The grand opening of the sanctuary was bigger than anyone expected. Local news crews came with microphones and cameras, and kids from all over the county poured in with homemade banners. "Let them run free," and "Thank you, Thunder." The mayor gave a speech, the sheriff grinned for photos, and the new sign, "Moore Mustang Sanctuary," was unveiled under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Thunder, scars fading but spirit undimmed, led his herd out of the trees and into the open, heads high, manes flying. Ava caught it all on her phone, her live stream filled with cheers and happy tears. After the ceremony, Ethan slipped away to a quiet corner of the pasture, notebook in hand. He wrote slowly, the words coming clear and true. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is care, even when it's scary. Sometimes you have to be the one to speak up, even if your voice shakes. And sometimes, if you stand up for what's wild and true, you'll find you're not alone after all. Ava plopped down beside him, journal in her lap. "You're going to be famous," she teased. "Maybe we should write a book. Thunder's story." Ethan grinned. "We already did. We just lived it." From the new barn, their dad waved, motioning them over. Together, they watched as families fed apples to the Mustangs, little kids running wild themselves, laughter ringing through the air. Bandit chased butterflies, barking with pure joy. For the first time, Ethan allowed himself to look back, not with regret, but with gratitude. He remembered the stormy night, the river rising, the first time he touched Thunder's wet, shaking flank. He remembered the fear, the anger, the aching sense that they were too small to change anything. He remembered their mom's voice in his mind, telling him that sometimes courage was just doing the next right thing, even when you're scared. He looked at his family, his dad, stronger than ever, Ava, bold and creative, Luke, already planning an article for his Chicago school paper. He looked at Clay, once their enemy, now their partner. He looked at Thunder, running free with his herd, no fences strong enough to hold him, but staying close by choice, not fear. In the weeks that followed, the sanctuary grew beyond anyone's dreams. Ava's video was picked up by news networks in other states. Donations poured in, enough for a vet clinic, an education center, even scholarships for kids who wanted to learn about wildlife. Schools scheduled field trips months in advance. Volunteers came from other ranches, even from the city, all wanting to be a part of something hopeful and new. The lessons rippled outward, subtle but powerful. Neighbors who once argued over fences now worked side by side. Kids who had once teased Ethan and Ava at school now came to help muck stalls or paint signs. Even Clay, still stubborn, could be found every Saturday repairing old gates or helping a foal find its footing. On the last evening of summer, as the sky blazed orange and pink, Ethan climbed the fence and watched Thunder standing tall at the highest point of the pasture, mane catching the light. Ava joined him, and together they listened to the quiet, broken only by the sound of hooves and distant laughter. Ethan pulled out his notebook for the last time that summer, writing a single sentence. Sometimes it takes a wild spirit to teach a whole town what it means to care. He closed the book, heart full, and watched as Thunder reared and galloped down the hill, leading his herd into the darkening grass, free as they were always meant to be. And somewhere in that wildness, Ethan knew what they had done here would last, not just for Thunder and his herd, but for every person who found the courage to do the right thing, even when it was hard, even when no one else believed. Because in the end, the fight for something wild and good is never really over. It just becomes the legacy you leave behind, alive, fierce, and running free.